Joining us now, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, twice in a week. You're spoiling me, Mr Javid. Talk to me about this new NHS report. Leaders praised for their dedication, but it does find that bullying, discrimination and shifting the blame when things go wrong are rife in the NHS. Why is that?
Well, look, today we're announcing what I think is the biggest shake-up in leadership in the NHS and social care in a generation. It follows this independent review by General Sir Gordon Messenger. And why we've done this is really we're investing record amounts in the NHS and care and to help with the recovery from the pandemic. It's important that we have good leadership throughout the NHS and care so that every pound is spent well on patients' priorities. And what this report shows is that, I mean, first of all, and this is the best news, is that there are fantastic examples throughout the NHS and care of great leadership, and I see that almost every day. But there are also examples of poor leadership, and that leads to poor patient outcomes. So it gives a number of recommendations on how good leadership can be made more consistent throughout the country. It also, to your point, it gives evidence, unfortunately, of, in some cases, of poor behaviour, a bit of a blame culture in certain parts. And of course, that can't be tolerated. So I'm going to accept all the recommendations of this independent report. And that's because I know that it's going to lead to a significant improvement across the board in leadership and management in the NHS and care, which most importantly means an improvement in patient outcomes.
OK. Now, I'm sure you'll see in this morning's papers that NHS advice on ovarian cancer on the website has dropped the reference to it affecting women. What it actually says now is ovarian cancer affects the two small organs, ovaries, that store the eggs needed to make babies. Why the change?
Well, look, I haven't seen that particular report, but I have heard of instances like that, and I don't think it's right. You know, you won't be surprised to know that as the Health Secretary, I think that your sex matters, your biological sex is incredibly important to make sure you get the right treatment, the very best treatment. You've given an example of ovarian cancer. I could equally pick prostate cancer, which we know can only happen for those that are biologically male, and so it's important that when messaging is given to people, for cancers, that's a great example that you've picked, that words like women and men are used so that people know who you're talking about and then we can actually do something about it.
Are you going to get the wording changed back then?
Well, I am looking into this, and you'll know, look, the NHS, there are many different trusts, and I want to listen to why someone might have taken a different approach. I don't just want to assume, but I think I've made my views clear on this. Yeah,
but it's actually on the NHS website. So, and as we both know, as many of our viewers will know, ovarian cancer is a silent killer. Generally, a lot of women it kills a lot of women in their 30s, 40s, 50s because they don't know they've got it until they're at stage 4 and then there's nothing that can be done about it. When you have confusing wording like that, it's just not going to help. So don't you think, well, I'm guessing from what you're saying, go on.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay, look, I agree. And also, a few months back, a similar issue came up over cervical cancer, where I saw some. In that case, it was draft literature around getting more women, encouraging to come in for smear tests, and it was important. Of course, it's important to talk about women when you're talking about cervical cancer. And believe it or not, there are women out there that don't know always that when you're talking about cervixes and things, you're actually talking about women. And the way you do that is make sure that you're using the right and the sensible words. So. Okay. Look, I know there's some sensitivity around this language, but we have to use common sense and use the right language so that we can give people the best possible patient care.
OK, so that wording should be changed back. Let's wait and see what happens. Thanks for the clarification on that, Health Secretary. Rail strikes, let's talk about those. 3 in a week at the end of the month. We're just trying to get ourselves back on our feet as a country and as an economy. What's the government going to do about it?
Look, we obviously don't agree with this decision of the unions. I think it's not just clearly a bad outcome for travellers if these strikes went ahead. I actually think it's bad for the workers because you need to have an industry that's going to be sustainable. We know as a result of the pandemic there are some habits that are developed, and things might not go quite back to what they were pre-pandemic. And let's remember, during the pandemic, I think the government put in some extra £16 billion to support the rail industry. That's almost something like £600 per household. These are huge amounts of money, and that kind of thing can't continue. So what I would urge the industry to do and the unions is to basically just get round the table and keep talking. That's the best way. Just talk like civilized adults and find a way through. I think everyone can understand each other, and these are challenging times, but talk.
What about fuel? Up to £2 a litre now. This time last year it was £1.30 a litre. The government making something like £26 billion in fuel duty. Is it time to look at cutting the fuel duty further? I know you've already done 5 pence a litre.
Well, we know that the fuel duty was, as you mentioned, it was cut very recently by the Chancellor. That's the biggest cut in fuel duty I can ever remember, and that does cost the Treasury billions. And I hear what you say about fuel duty raises, I think you said 26 billion or thereabouts. But at the end of the day, we also have to remember that I'm standing in this hospital today, and I've talked about investing billions in NHS and care. The NHS's budget this year is something like £160 billion, and that money has to come from somewhere. So it is right that we keep all taxes and duties under review, especially when people are facing the cost of living challenges. It's right that we cut fuel duty by 5p, and I'm sure the Chancellor will be looking to do whatever else can be afforded over time.
Now, I know you'll want to address this allegation that Labour's put forward today, so allow me to give you the opportunity to do that. They say they've unearthed evidence of you avoiding hundreds of thousands of pounds in tax before you got into politics. Did you?
Well, no, of course not. This is typical Labour, personal attacks on people. And this is what Labour does when they've got nothing to say about the real issues, the issues at hand. I think what people want to know from Labour is, what are their plans to deal with the NHS, COVID backlogs? What are their plans to help with cost of living? What are their plans for growth in the economy? This is just typical smear attacks by Labour, and it's nothing more.
OK, what they say is that records showed that you were a director of a company set up by your brother for a single day in May of 2005, and then you gave up yours and your wife's shares. During that year, SA Capital raised almost £1 million in loans. There were only 411,000 was secured from banks, leaving 585,000 unaccounted for. 2005 accounts also show that £491,000 was lent to an unknown party. The suggestion being that if the purpose of the loans was to provide a tax-efficient way for money held offshore to enter Britain. Is that nonsense, or is there some truth in that?
Well, I've been very clear about my own tax affairs, my tax status, my residences, when I've worked in the UK, when I've worked abroad. I've been very clear and open about that. And at all times, I've been clear that all rules, of course, have always been followed. And what Labour, what you're referring to in this letter is this is just a typical sort of Labour smear campaign where they don't have any evidence on anything, and they're just making things up so that they can launch personal attacks. That's all it is.
So let me ask you one more on that, and then we'll move on to the Prime Minister, if I may. So £585,000 unaccounted for is the suggestion there, and potentially the purpose of the loans to provide a tax-efficient way for money held offshore to enter Britain. Is there any truth at all in that allegation?
No, what I've been clear about, and as I've said, I've been very open about all of this, is that, and yesterday when I was asked about this for the first time, is that some 20 years ago, I invest in my brother's business to help him start a new business? Of course I did, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's something that many people will do to help out their siblings or loved ones in starting their own business or their enterprise, and that's all there is to this. That's all there is.
OK, so there was no way that money was coming in from offshore without paying the tax on it. OK. Talk to me about the Prime Minister and suggestions that he's potentially going to he's going to have a reshuffle. I know you won't comment on a reshuffle, but suggestions that he is potentially going to promote people who have been incredibly supportive publicly and privately over the last few weeks. In your experience, does the Prime Minister prioritise loyalty over experience?
I mean, first of all, this is just all speculation again. We've had a very important week, obviously with that important vote. It was a clear and decisive win for the Prime Minister. And speaking to colleagues after that vote yesterday, including some that I spoke to that publicly said they didn't support the Prime Minister in the vote, but they're Democrats like all of us, and they accept the result of the vote, and they're getting behind the Prime Minister. And what the Prime Minister does next in terms of his cabinet, his ministers, that's as always for any Prime Minister, that's just a decision for them. I'm not spending any time speculating or thinking about that. I'm just getting on with my job as the Health and Care Secretary, and that's why I was here today to talk about this new leadership review.
Indeed so, and that's exactly why I said to you I wasn't expecting you to comment on it, but nevertheless, my question was, does the PM prioritise loyalty over experience? We've seen him do it in the past in some of the high offices of state. Is it your experience that he prioritises loyalty?
But my experience is that he wants the best people in the right roles so that we can get on with dealing with the huge challenges, especially post-pandemic, we face as a country. That's why I think, for example, I was asked to step into this role. It's the toughest job I've done in government so far, but it's also, I'd say, it's one of the most rewarding, one of the most privileged to work with such incredible people, but to help to deal with such important challenges.
Before I let you go, is it right that the 1922 committee could look again at the rules, to change the rules, so instead of the Prime Minister having a year's grace before he would face any further challenges against him, it could be reduced to 6 months? Is it right that they moved the goalposts?
I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not an expert on the rules around the 22 committee. What I do know is that the rules, as they stand, are that you can't have another vote for a year. But look, I mean, as I say, I'm not an expert on the rules, but I think right here and now, we've had this ballot. It was done properly in a completely fair, transparent way. The party overall has expressed confidence in the Prime Minister, and it's time now just to unite and to get on with the job.
I didn't think you were going to say that. I thought you were going to say absolutely not. He's won the vote and he's safe for a year.
Well, I've just said to you, he's won the vote. He's got the confidence of the majority of MPs, and that's how this works. No Prime Minister I've known in the past has had the confidence of 100% of MPs. There's a democratic decision, and that's why we're going to get on with the job, for the years to come. But let's just get on with it. I think that's what people want to see.
I know you've got to go, but just to clarify that, I'm not sure. What did you mean when you said you're not sure whether they should look again at it?
No, I thought you asked me, are they able to change the rules? And my answer to that is I'm not sure about how the rules.
Yeah, they can, if they want to.
Well, okay, well, I'll take your word for it. I'm just not an expert on the 22 rules, so I'm not going to talk about something I don't know about.
Should they change the rules? Well,
of course they should. Okay, of course they shouldn't change the rules. I thought you were asking me whether they can change the rules. No. But there's no need to change any rules because we've had the ballot. It's a clear, decisive result, and now we just get on with the job.
Oh, I'm glad we cleared that up. That would have been a headline later on today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Health Secretary, as always. Thank you.
Thank you.